Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we can be reacting to
Why living in Portugal has become impossible.
Living in Portugal is worse than you think. Just 10 years ago, you could buy a home in Lisbon for €1,000 per square meter. Today,
Okay, so also I'm assuming this is from perspective of Portuguese people, not for immigrants. Because like if someone coming from, I have a feeling it's gonna be with the inflation because I'm like all the expats raising the prices. So I think this is not from like an expat coming in, but from someone living in Portugal.
that same space would cost you over 2,500, a staggering 250% increase in less than a decade.
To be fair though, this is a world problem at this point. It's not Portugal problem. Here in Miami, I don't have the stats to back it up, but the numbers look quite similar.
This isn't an outlier. In 2022 alone, house prices rose by 20%. And in Portugal's major cities, you need to earn around double the minimum wage just to be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment, which can cost up to €2,000. There is a housing crisis, a cost of living crisis, and now even an immigration crisis. But not as you may think. In September 2024, the country saw one of the biggest protests in history. Thousands took to the streets to protest, but not against the government. Their target was a modern phenomenon: tourists and wealthy foreigners. Last year, tourism employed 1 in every 10 people in Portugal, and so-called digital nomads have been bringing in billions of euros every year for the economy. But in the eyes of many Portuguese,
how are they bringing money for the economy in Portugal if they're digital nomads? Don't they report their taxes to the country, their
Well,
native country?
yes, but they live in Portugal. They spend money in Portugal, so they spend, they buy groceries in Portugal. They buy, pay electricity, they pay bills in Portugal, rent in Portugal. So they do bring money to economy, but he said billions. So how many
Yeah, that's a lot.
digital nomads has to be there to bring in billions? If he said millions, okay, believable.
Yeah.
Billions?
Is that billions?
He said billions.
been bringing in billions of euros every year.
Billions with a B. So how many digital nomads are there to be bringing in billions? That's crazy. I don't think that's correct. I think he's exaggerating.
Yeah, for the economy. But now,
Cause like digital nomads, they exist, but it's not like a
don't know how much
that
they're
common.
spending.
Yeah, like it's not like that common. Cause I feel like digital nomad, for example, if you are a digital nomad and you choose to go to Portugal, you're probably making a solid money, but not big enough money to where you could be like
Maybe like the only
rich,
people.
rich. Like, because if you're rich, rich, you're gonna stay where you at. Like, people leaving America because they can't afford it. So you're not that rich, right? Like if you're rich, rich, you're gonna live here. So that's why it's kind of. I feel like he exaggerated that.
in the eyes of many Portuguese, the damage has already been done. People are being pushed out of their homes and onto the street, or becoming housekeepers in the homes they used to grow up in. The Portuguese have had enough, and to many, the
That's
causes
the
are clear.
craziest thing, to become housekeepers to where you used to live.
But in reality, these issues are just symptoms of a much bigger problem facing the nation, one which could come to define the country, and even Europe, for decades to come. This is how living in Portugal became impossible. Portugal's recent crises, despite its urgency, is a relatively new phenomenon. Even just a decade ago, many locals still saw it as an affordable place to live. But to understand how Portugal plunged into a crisis so quickly,
Looks like Brazil, huh?
Yeah.
I guess that's where Brazil, got the inspiration from.
we need to first go back in time. In 1974, Portugal had just emerged from a dictatorship and was about to embark on a journey of transformation. While countries like Germany and France had spent decades building modern economies, Portugal was essentially starting from scratch. For the ordinary Portuguese, it meant earning less than $9 a day in today's money. And while times were tough, the country began to rebound. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, the economy grew steadily as European funds poured in, financing new highways, bridges, and modernisation projects. Portugal was transforming before everyone's eyes and becoming quite a nice place to live. But beneath this veneer of progress, a key problem remained. Portugal was still struggling to develop competitive industries that could provide high-paying jobs, things like manufacturing or high-skilled industries. Instead, The country was increasingly shifting towards a service economy, and one sector in particular was growing faster than all the others: tourism. Throughout the 1990s,
Makes sense. Nice weather. Like for Europe, it's one of the best weathers in Europe. Food is good. Yeah, makes sense. Why not?
Portugal had been aggressively marketing itself as a tourist destination, putting places like the Algarve or Lisbon
When I was growing up, Portugal was just a place like in history that we hear about, but I have never really understood or like grasp, okay, what is Portugal aside from world history?
Interesting. Yeah, for me, Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo.
and Porto front and centre. And by the early
But even before Cristiano, I always liked Portuguese team.
Mm.
Luis Figo. I don't remember nobody else now, but since I always liked when Cristiano came, they became my second favorite in Europe after Netherlands, of course.
2000s, this had become Portugal's fastest growing industry.
The thing is, what
Within
we know
half-
is like Portugal is the country that's right by Spain.
For a decade, the country's income from tourism nearly doubled, from 6 to 11 billion euros in 2000 to 2005. As tourism grew, so did construction. New hotels, resorts, and vacation properties sprouted along the coastline. And on the surface, this was great. Money was pouring in, creating jobs across a load of new sectors, and making those who were placed in the right industries really, really rich. Portugal was becoming Europe's affordable paradise. But this growing dependence on tourism and foreign investment was slowly building a ticking time bomb, one which erupted in 2008. Before we dive further in, I want to say a big shout out to today's sponsors, Heroes No Dash and Scrum, one of your games. Heroes game that chapters the updates in the description. Drop was developed a robust global financial Heroes
Interesting. Video game sponsor. We never seen video game sponsor before. That's interesting. Okay.
history today, and let me know in the comments who your first hero drop was. The global financial crisis hit Portugal like a brick wall. The country had never fully developed a robust industrial base, and instead had become increasingly dependent on tourism and construction, and now faced an economic collapse. By 2011,
You know,
Portugal was
everyone
forced
had
to
the
accept
same collapse at the same damn time.
It
The
seems
same damn time.
everyone has the same time collapses and everyone has the same problems.
Yeah.
But that certain countries are affected more than others. But this problem we're seeing, as I said here in Miami, same problem. We saw in Ireland kind of similar problem. Maybe not like tourism. Not people don't want to like go to tour there, But there is a problem. We saw like the housing with the immigrants coming in too. So yeah, it's
It's like we go in a cycle.
Yeah.
a 78 billion euro bailout from the IMF and the EU. And with the construction industry collapsing and unemployment soaring, the government needed a quick solution. Amid all the turmoil, there was, however, one golden opportunity. One industry that could single-handedly pull Portugal back from the brink of disaster, or so it seemed. This is, of course, tourism, and the country once again went all in. Except this time with a twist. In 2012, the government launched the now infamous Golden Visa Scheme. The idea was simple. Offer residency to wealthy foreigners in exchange for investment in the country. Wealthy people would bring in a ton of money, which would in turn create jobs and flow into the economy. Portugal became a global hotspot for wealthy foreigners,
It
with this
never
one scheme
does.
alone generating
I feel like the cheapest people are billionaires. The cheapest people, they're not gonna drop any.
No, not in that sense. In the sense that you have to pay to get the visa. You have to pay like half a million or whatever to get a visa. So that money does go to the government. I think that's how it works. Yeah, so you do get something, and if there's many people that.
Yeah, but aside from that, after that,
Well, they do have to live there. They contribute to the economy. I'm not saying they create jobs per se. Like they don't start companies to,
how much is it for the golden one? They
I don't
off
know.
the
I
price?
don't know. Let's see.
over 7 billion euros.
Because
But beneath the success
from
lay a
what
mount
I saw with Elon Musk when he was, making government more efficient, yeah, I mean, he found some money, but this money in respect to the debt is nothing.
mounting crisis. Houses were simply running out, and the ones which were available were becoming even more expensive. In the decade following the launch of the Golden Visa Scheme, property prices in major cities have increased on average by more than 250%, all coming at a time when average incomes have remained stagnant. These visas allowed investors from outside of the EU to get a resident visa in Portugal and invest. But instead of living there, often they would just redo a house, and it would still be left empty. Many times, those same properties would then be sold on time and time again, creating a distortion on the housing.
But so if they don't want to live there, why do they need a visa? I don't understand that. Because the whole point is, oh, you can live in Portugal, okay, but if you don't live there, why do you need a visa for?
Maybe it's easier to buy property.
I mean, I'm sure it is, but you buy it for a visa. Otherwise, you could have bought property without the visa too. I don't know.
Market, being one of the leading causes of the current crisis. Sellers also strategically price properties to meet the golden visa investment threshold of €500,000, artificially
$500,000.
increasing prices. In fact, after the program's introduction, the number of transactions
So
exactly
it's
at
not
this
like
mark
the actual card, it's the house.
I guess, yeah. You
Oh.
spend $500,000 in the country and you get a visa, I guess.
increased by 60%. This has made it nearly impossible for many Portuguese citizens to afford a home. With that said, the crisis isn't all down to the government's visa scheme. At the same time, Portugal's tourism industry was booming. From 2010 to 2024, the number of tourists coming into the country more than doubled. Despite only having a population of 10 million, in 2024,
I think what we've seen, I don't remember now if it was Spain or also Portugal, it was the Airbnbs. That people can't get nothing for rent because there's so many Airbnbs because there's so many tourists.
the country welcomed around 18 million tourists and accounted for nearly 20% of the country's GDP, which is almost 60 billion euros every single year. For context, this rate is one of the highest in Europe. Neighbouring France and Spain are both.
Well, yes, but also it depends on the weather. If you look at the countries, the warmest countries have the highest rates.
For context, this rate is one of the
Greece is 20%, Italy is 10%, Spain 14%, all others, okay. Exception, Netherlands, a little kush 11%, but aside from that, all sub 10% because, well, there isn't as not that as much to see, but people come for the weather. It makes sense as vacation destinations.
highest in Europe. Neighbouring France and Spain are both also tourism hubs, but this figure only makes up around 13% of their economy. While tourism has certainly had many negative effects, it did also revitalised entire regions. After the financial crisis, many parts of the city were in economic freefall, and streets and buildings were often
Does look
derelict.
rough.
But with this boom in tourism, things changed, as investors flooded in, restoring historic buildings and bringing lots of much needed money into many areas. For many, this was a lifeline. It created hundreds of thousands of jobs and pumped money into local businesses, saving the economy from further disaster. But despite this, many people have now had enough, thinking it's simply gone too far. While tourism created jobs, they were predominantly in low-paying and seasonal sectors. The average tourism worker earns around €1,200 a month.
Introducing Business Essentials from US Bank with no monthly maintenance fee checking and card payment processing,
which can be barely enough to cover rent in most major cities. In the Algarve, Portugal's most tourism-dependent region, many tourism workers cannot afford to live in the communities they serve, with some commuting for hours each way from inland areas where housing is still somewhat affordable. In reality, most of the benefits from tourism go to a select few, those that already have land, buildings, or means to take advantage of the boom. It's therefore perhaps not surprising that Portugal has one of the highest levels of wealth inequality in the developed world, and this is what the tourism boom has been fueling. All of these tourists need somewhere to stay, and hotels, short-term rentals, and Airbnb properties have exploded in number, squeezing out long-term housing options for locals. Today, major cities in Portugal are dominated by tourist flats. In 2020, they represented over 11% of the housing stock, and in areas like the historical neighbourhood of Alfama, now 60% of the houses are used for short-term rentals. Paired with the Golden Visa scheme,
Was it France?
With what?
I feel like this. I'm trying to remember which country it was.
For what? The Airbnbs?
Yeah.
I believe it was. I think it was Spain.
Spain.
I want to think. I
Okay.
said Spain. It wasn't France, no. I think it was Spain, maybe Portugal, but it's between these two. But my initial guess would be Spain.
In tens of thousands of wealthy foreigners, and it's easy to see why Portuguese citizens are now being priced out of their own homes. In the last 4 years alone, in Lisbon, prices have surged by 57%. In Porto, a staggering 61% increase, and in the Algarve, up by 51%.
Well, I'm
But
curious
here's where things
is
get
that the people who are selling the homes to the foreigners, where are they going? Did they have like multiple homes and they can let go like a few?
Probably.
Because for it to be this kind of situation.
I think it's investors build their houses and then they sell it to the foreigners. So these are not
Oh,
old
these are
houses.
not old
They
houses.
build
Okay.
new houses and they sell new houses. I think that's what's going
Mhm.
on.
Interesting. These price increases are not happening because there's not enough houses. In fact, Portugal has one of the highest rates of housing in Europe, at 1.4 dwellings per household. When it comes to buying a house, it's not much easier either, and in cities like Lisbon, in 2023, 1/3 of all houses sold went to foreigners, and in 2024,
That's a
a
lot.
third of Lisbon's historical centre was left unoccupied. While it's not necessarily true to say that there are not enough houses, Portugal would certainly benefit from more construction. Unfortunately for them, it has one of the lowest building rates.
Seems like the government has to pass some sort of bill that if a house is empty, you have to pay. If people, can't afford, if there's a problem with people not affording, pass a bill that, okay, if your house is more empty for more than half a year or like more than 3 months or whatever, there's no residents, you have to start paying monthly fee.
Or if they develop new spaces, they should assign for a percentage of it to be sold to local the
True,
citizens
or
in
yeah,
of that country.
or limit the international money coming in. Yeah.
In Europe, at only 11 new homes per 1,000 residents in the last decade. Also paired with some of the most extensive and complicated systems of planning regulations in Europe, with further environmental protections and ones on construction noise keeping this number even lower. When you combine these two elements, an explosion in demand and heavily restricted supply, you're practically guaranteed one thing: skyrocketing prices. In a country where 50% of people make under €1,000 a month, living in a major city has become totally unaffordable. The country's monthly minimum wage is €840, but the average cost of a one-bedroom flat in a major city like Porto is €1,100. For most of the population, home ownership has now become a distant dream, and renting has become a financial nightmare. That's why in 2022, over half of people aged 25 to 34 still lived with their parents. This wasn't just about comfort or independence, it's creating a demographic crisis. Portugal's birth rate has plummeted to just 1.3 children per woman, one of the lowest in the world. The consequences from this are already visible. Portugal's population has been shrinking since 2010.
Once again, that's a worldwide phenomenon for the most part. It's not just exclusive to Portugal. We see in South Korea, it's what, 0.84 or 87? That's horrible.
With more deaths than births per year. In rural areas, schools are closing, and entire villages are being abandoned as young people flee to other EU countries in search of better opportunities. Massive waves of tourism have made living in the country totally unaffordable for the majority of citizens. So you might be wondering
Wow,
what the
it's
government
like the
is doing.
disappearing country that we're seeing. Like the countryside is gonna be obsolete
Yeah.
because you will have to work, and to get real work that makes money is in the city.
Yes, what we see exactly in South Korea. It's everywhere in the cities.
To curb this housing crisis, which in part they created? Well, unfortunately, not very much. In fact, in 2022, the government doubled down, launching a new digital nomad scheme. This allows remote workers to live in Portugal while benefiting from tax breaks and a lower cost of living. But to qualify, workers must earn at least €2,800 per month, a healthy 4 times the country's minimum wage. In another effort to seemingly punish their citizens, this has created a massive influx of wealthy foreigners, while simultaneously imposing measures that make it nearly impossible for locals to secure housing. To make matters worse, houses aren't the only asset the country has been selling off to wealthy foreigners. Take Fidelidade. Founded in 1808, it's Portugal's oldest and largest insurance company, commanding over 30% of the market share. For generations, it was seen as a pillar of reliability, an institution deeply woven into Portugal's financial and economic fabric. Yet in 2014, something changed. The company was sold, and not to a Portuguese buyer. Fosun International Limited, a Chinese conglomerate, acquired an 80% stake, effectively taking control, not just of the company's profits, but of its decision-making power as well. This wasn't just another business deal, it was a clear sign of what was happening across the country. Portugal's most valuable assets were slipping into foreign hands, and this was just the beginning. Energy of Portugal, the country's leading energy provider, was sold to Chinese buyers, and since then, energy prices have been hiked repeatedly, squeezing households already struggling with rising rents. Motor Angel, a major construction and engineering firm, sold over 30% of its capital to China, handing over significant influence to foreign investors.
Damn.
The pattern is clear. Portugal is selling off.
That's That's even worse than the housing crisis, because at least, if it's locally owned by local businesses, local people, maybe there's gonna be some sort of kindness of the heart, to, and hopefully, if it's foreign government, they don't give a
Forget
fuck.
about it.
Yeah.
its assets piece by piece, but at what cost? These foreign acquisitions may seem like smart business moves, bringing immediate cash flows and generating quick profits for Portuguese sellers. But beneath the surface lies a dangerous trade-off with far-reaching consequences. When foreign corporations buy Portuguese assets, they create a one-way flow of wealth. Profits that once circulated within Portugal's economy now flow outward to international shareholders and foreign headquarters. The money that could have been reinvested in local communities instead enriches multinational corporations thousands of miles away. More troubling still is the loss of control over essential industries. As key sectors fall under foreign ownership, Portugal's government finds its hands increasingly tied, unable to effectively regulate or protect national interests. Strategic decisions about energy, insurance, and infrastructure are now being made in boardrooms in Beijing and New York, rather than in Lisbon. This corporate sell-off couldn't have happened at a worse moment. Today, Portugal stands at the precipice of a perfect storm. A country once celebrated as an affordable paradise is rapidly becoming unlivable for its own people. Housing costs have skyrocketed, wages remain stagnant,
rent is
and the
higher
foreign
than
investment
Snoop
that was
Dogg's.
supposed to be Portugal's salvation has instead become the force driving locals from their homes and communities. The protests in Portugal are not just about housing, they're a warning sign of something much bigger. If these issues remain unaddressed, Portugal
I can
risks becoming a
imagine the
nation
people living there, like how people are feeling against the newcomers.
Stuff. Yeah.
where the next generation has no future, where young people either stay trapped in their parents' home or leave the country altogether. The question now is, will the government step in to fix these deep-rooted issues, or will Portugal continue down a path where its own citizens are pushed out in favour of foreign wealth?
It's gonna transform Portugal completely.
Yeah, this is sucks. Sad.
Let's see the comments.
Sad route is going, yeah.
It's always weird to see those videos where they're saying, "Oh, I'm here as a digital nomad." Da, 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 da.
I think that living in everywhere has become impossible. That's what
Yeah,
I've been saying.
I agree.
You could say living in X city has become impossible. X city is any city in the West. Well, actually, the world, but I live in the West. I'll focus. Yeah, that's what I said.
But really, it opens your eyes to see other people also going through similar issues.
The narration audio cuts off from 10:55 to 11:10. Oh.
Okay. Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord, and as always, share as much kindness as possible.